the fact that this was blown by other people, and then finally they had to admit it. It reminds me very much of what happened with Steve Wynn. He went on a Sunday program and said, when somebody gets into the security elevator and they're making all these trips up the security elevator and nobody says anything about it, and they were like, what? What do you know about this? I mean, he knew that was happening, but the police were covering that up. And then after he tipped that on national television, then the police come out and start saying some things like that. But what about the security cameras? I mean, there's security cameras all over these casinos. I mean, they essentially drive the security camera business, and we got no footage of Paddock there or anything about that happening. What do you know about that?
Well, I'll tell you. I mean, there probably isn't a 3-mile radius anywhere in the United States of America that has more cameras than that Las Vegas Strip. I've been told by several people that Mandalay Bay alone has thousands of cameras. Okay,
that's right.
Thousands. So, and I mean, I've also been told that they can zoom into a quarter and see if it's heads or tails. So I think a lot of what's going on is the big money who really runs Vegas. They're the ones who really pull the strings, and they want to get back to business as usual, and they want everybody to forget about this. And hey, come back. You've seen the ads on television. Come back to Vegas. And win a bunch of money and walk out of the blackjack tables with 2 hot blondes on your arms. And of course, the reality of the situation is that people come to Vegas and they lose and give that money back to the casino. But they sell.
That was one of the funniest things that came out of this whole narrative was the guy was a professional video poker player. It's like, I'm sorry, there is no such thing as the people who own the poker player machines that are making a lot of money, but not the people who do it on a long-term professional basis. I mean, that was a joke. But yeah, you could see the cover-up, I think, in these timelines as they came out. First, they had Jesus Campos, who was the hero who stopped everything. He was at the very end of their narrative. Then they flipped it and made him at the very beginning. And then immediately their lawsuit started because they said, wait a minute, if he was there, then why didn't they shut this thing down sooner? So they immediately came out with version number 3. Then he disappears for 4 or 5 days and reappears on Ellen DeGeneres' program. I had a video about it, Ellen finds Jesus, and she covers up for all this and said, that's it.
Yeah, and my movie, What Happened in Vegas, examines something that a lot of people don't know, which is that MGM has actually contributed large sums of money to Joe Lombardo's upcoming sheriff's reelection campaign.
Oh, so, yeah, I bet. Yeah.
So, in my opinion, one of the reasons those timelines kept shifting is to minimize MGM's legal liability. Okay, because over 500 people shot, they have a big problem, and they're going to get sued. And my documentary, What Happened in Vegas, talks about their motive for shifting the timeline. And I don't think it's a coincidence that the last timeline that Joe Lombardo settled on after, putting those other ones out there is the one that appears to minimize MGM's legal liability. So
that's right.
One of the things that really inspired me was to get this out there so that the victims of the mass shooting don't get screwed over by the LVMPD and MGM's lies, because they're interested in themselves and they're going to do anything they can to protect their assets and protect their money. And Joe Lombardo is going to take care of, the big money casino that's contributed to his reelection campaign. And if that means that videos have to go missing and lies get told on police reports, this is a sheriff who will do that, in my opinion. He's done it many times in his career. So,
absolutely.
I really want the victims of the mass shooting to not get screwed. And if the MGM and if the LVMPD are liable for this, they need to pay for that. And
we don't have a couple of minutes. I want to ask you.
Taken care of, just because,
hang on a second, Ramsey. We've only got a couple of minutes, and we talked about some of the victims that give a context to this. Those 4 victims I mentioned at the beginning of this segment. And you're talking about the victims that you want to see justice given to. Did you interview some of those victims from the Vegas shooting? Did you have any interaction with people who had been shot or families of those who had been killed?
It's interesting. We got up there pretty fast after it happened, and the town was so scarred by the incident that people were like almost too traumatized to talk. But I did. So I ended up talking a lot with the insiders who were kind of on the trail of things, like Doug Papa and Laura Loomer, and they're featured in the movie What Happened in Vegas. But we had to get the movie out so fast that we found that most of the people, but the other thing we ran into is a lot of the victims were scared for their life. They were scared to talk because a month after this happened, several people who had survived the shooting mysteriously went disappearing. And our documentary takes a look at, what happened in Vegas takes a look at, did they know too much? Yeah. So I really ran into a huge wall of people who were just scared to talk.
Well, that in and of itself is very interesting, maybe the subject for another documentary. We've been talking to Ramsey Denison. Again, you can find him, his website, where you can see the trailer, get information about the movie, What Happened in Vegas, themovie.com. Also, you can find him on Facebook.com/WH, as in what happened, WH Vegas Doc. Thank you so much for joining us, Ramsey. Very important documentary about police corruption and that shooting incident. We'll be right back.